This is Lexington Green Television, the show about small business, free enterprise, and independent voting rights. Now, here is your host, Robert Marcoccio.
Good evening. I'm Robert Marcoccio. I am the founder and president of the No Affiliation Alliance. I ran for United States Congress in the last election, and I ran on the platform of representing small businesses. And even though I didn't win the election, the representation of small businesses is still an issue that I feel very strongly about. Tonight I have a guest here, Andy Evans. He was an Eagle Scout, honorably discharged from the Navy. He's a co-founder of the Hanover Tea Party Patriots. He is a certified emergency medical technician and an independent licensed insurance agent. His wife recently had a baby, 10 months ago, and he is registered libertarian and adheres to the libertarian philosophies. Now, we have him here tonight to talk about two issues, one regarding gun control and the other regarding how healthcare, Obama healthcare specifically, is going to affect insurances and small businesses in the area. So, with my concern with the Obama health care, well, actually the gun control, is the way that the president wants to incorporate the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention to provide the research to the federal government through the use of private doctors who will have the authority to ask their patients if there are guns in their homes. And what's your view on this?
I think, as in everything with government, we have a government that wants to consolidate power and authority. And I think that's exactly what this is doing. I think what Obamacare essentially does when it comes to firearms is it consolidates power. It takes it, it puts it in the hands now of bureaucracy, of healthcare professionals. It essentially mandates that they report when people own firearms. It's a way to get around our constitutional rights for privacy, and I think that's the gist of it.
What purpose would it even serve for a doctor to know that you own a gun, other than to report it to the federal government?
That's the only purpose.
That's the only. And my concern is the abuse of independent agencies in the use of sidestepping the Constitution. They have other independent agencies that have grown from this, and the Federal Highway Administration is one of them, to where in 1971 the Highway Administration was basically there, created to collect data on accidents that happened on the federal highways, and slowly it was expanded into collecting data from the Department of Transportations of each state to keep records on the drivers for misdemeanor offenses and everything else. So what actually they have done was they found a way to take a misdemeanor traffic violation and put it under federal jurisdiction. That they have been taking the driver's licenses away from people for a ticket that they got in another state that they never tended to, are now being denied their right to drive. This I'm bringing up because I see this as the potential goal of putting the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention in the collection of data for firearms to eventually put them into a position to where they can actually deny you medical attention if you own a weapon of some type. They've done this with other things, such as in vaccinations and things, and I believe you have experienced something like that with your child.
Absolutely.
So what exactly did they require? Because I know that what they were doing were trying to get you to swear off your rights,
right, in
order to just to be able to get health care.
Well, I mean, essentially, when you go to the doctors, when you take your infant to the doctors, and there's a vaccine schedule, what happens is the doctor legally has to advise you to get vaccinated. If you choose not to get vaccinated, then you have to sign a release form stating that you understand that you're putting your child at risk by not vaccinating your child. And then it's not necessarily that the doctor will not see you, but if you don't sign that form, then they won't see you. So essentially then, if you don't sign that form, basically admitting to putting your child at risk, then you're denied health care.
So basically what the government is doing is turning doctors into a law enforcement agency.
Absolutely.
That is law enforcement. They're basically evaluating who is potential threat and who is not who they consider as being somebody that should own a gun.
Right.
The mere presence of a weapon in a home is not a health hazard any more than a bottle of sleeping tablets.
Right.
The potential of a crime comes from the misuse and not from the possession itself.
Absolutely.
So with the Obamacare, how exactly does it affect your business as an independent insurance agent?
It's a double-edged sword, honestly. What it does is it creates these mandates. It creates mandates for individuals to have health insurance, and if they don't, they'll receive it's worded as a tax, but we'll call it what it is, it's a fine. If you don't have insurance, then you get fined by the government. This year, it's a small amount, but if you don't have insurance currently and you go to file your taxes, you're going to see a fine on that tax as an extra tax added on because you do not have health insurance. So in a sense, it could possibly help my personal business because now that mandate's in place, more people are going to need health insurance. So people that don't have insurance now obviously don't have access to a group insurance policy. Most people don't. So those people are going to be contacting me, an independent insurance agency, looking for an individual policy instead of a group policy. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is the mandate is not funded. So now businesses have to provide health care for their employees in some way, shape, or form, and it's an extra cost now to a lot of these small businesses who didn't have to do that before. So now it's an extra cost to them. What it's doing is it's rising healthcare costs because now businesses have to be charged more. Not only businesses have to be charged more, but insurance companies have to accept people regardless of pre-existing conditions, meaning that they're going to be dishing out more money, so their cost is going to go up. Ultimately, it's trickle-down economy. Their costs go up, our costs go up.
Yeah, well, that's one of the concerns that I have is the concern about the Obama health care tax is that it mandates that you purchase a minimum amount of health insurance care. What the concern is in the reality that, number one, the cost of gas has affected an increase in every household to include our utilities, food, and also property taxes, while the families and individuals' income has not even increased. I know of one person where they got a 20-cent raise, which put about $7 a paycheck onto their paycheck, and then with the increase of Social Security, which just happened, I'm not sure what the rate was that they had increased it, but that person now sees $3 less on their paycheck than they did before they even got the raise.
Right.
So they're losing like $9 a paycheck.
Yeah.
The other thing is this was taken straight from the Obama health care. It says right here, it says, it's here to strengthen the employer responsibility. Businesses are strained by the current health insurance system. Health costs eat into their ability to hire workers, invest in and expand their businesses, and compete locally and globally. Like individuals, larger employers should share in the responsibility for finding a solution. Under the state Senate bill, there is no mandate for employers to provide health care insurance. Okay. Now, the obvious part is that the government understands the strain that they're putting onto business, but they're going to go ahead and do it anyway. Absolutely. They also understand that they're costing more people money out of their household expenses, and they understand that, but they're going to do it anyway. So what it tells me is that they hear us, but they're not listening to us. And the small businesses are the ones that are worried right now because they're being run out of business by a lot of the impractical legislations that are being made by the federal government and the state governments right off the bat. What do you think?
Well, I think what it boils down to is look, we're almost $17 trillion in debt, okay? The economy is crashing. You know, whatever the semantics are, whether we're in a recession or a depression or this and that, I tell you, people are losing jobs, people are losing their houses, people are unable to pay their bills, people are filing bankruptcy and foreclosing all the time. So regardless of what you call it, it's bad. The government knows that. This, to me, is their plan to force the people to dump money back into the government so that they can spend more, because by their logic that them spending more will pick the economy back up. What we see though is it's unrealistic. Just like in a household, when I don't have money, I don't go out and spend somebody else's money and hope that that's gonna pick my bank account numbers back up. And that's what we see going on here. So to me, this is forcing people to dump every last penny into the economy when you know it's not willing. It's not free market at all.
Yeah, well, taxes, property taxes are going up, unemployment taxes are going up, Social Security taxes are going up. Governor Corbyn announced that he wants to raise more taxes so that he can build more highways, and we know he's going into an election in the next coming year. He seems to be trying to buy off the government unions, because everything, even the money that he received coming from the natural gas exploration north of here has gone right back into government highway maintenance. So that goes directly to the government highway maintenance companies and contractors, government contractors, to maintain those roads. And now we have to come up with the money to build, to take care of the maintenance of the roads throughout the rest of the state. My opinion about that is that money was received on royalties for the natural gas for the state, that it actually belongs to the people of the state.
Absolutely.
And although I understand that they have to maintain those roads because now they're going to have heavier traffic on there, that's a cost that should be handed over to the businesses. That royalty is not the expense of maintaining those roads. That's an entirely separate requirement. If the roads have to be maintained for that traffic that's being there for these vehicles, then that should be something that the owners, that the contractors of that company should have to participate in.
Right, absolutely.
The royalty money is something entirely different. The royalty money belongs to the state, and it should be dispersed equally throughout the state. And that in my fair, that would be the more appropriate and fair way of dispersing that money.
Absolutely, lower the tax burden for the year or for a couple of years.
Now you have a permit to carry a gun openly, and in fact, you got it on right now. When I've talked to people, some people get upset when they see somebody carrying a weapon out in the open. Mm-hmm. Now, in my personal opinion, I see somebody in plain clothes with a weapon that is holstered. My first thought is that the person is a law enforcement or that the person's an off-duty police officer. I mean, I'm still wary about them.
Absolutely.
You know, because I mean, we know of the recent thing with a police officer that's in the news, but you know, I'm more cautious about what I don't see,
right,
than what I do see.
Absolutely.
I mean, so what exactly are your opinion about? You know, why do you carry a weapon out? What is your fear of society, or just your own personal satisfaction?
Right. Well, let me just kind of explain the process real quick. Pennsylvania is an open carry state, so anybody in the entire state, whether you're from the state or not, can openly carry a weapon without any kind of license. As soon as you take a loaded weapon into a vehicle, then you need a license to carry firearms, is what the state issues. Or if you want to conceal your firearm, you need a license to carry firearms. I do have a license to carry firearms. I do often conceal, but more often than not, I open carry. To me, it's for several reasons. Given the political environment, it is a political statement for me, because given the political environment, people are scared of guns. People,
right.
With
good cause, but
absolutely. Well, it's a knee-jerk reaction. So to me, what my purpose is in open carrying is to show people. And again, you know, you gave a little bit of my background. You know, I was raised with two loving parents. They taught me good morals, good manners, good values, and I like to believe that when I go out into my community, I emulate that. I show people that I'm not a crazy guy that's going to start shooting up movie theaters or it's going to start killing people at random. That when I say yes, ma'am, and open the door for somebody, and they see that I'm holding a gun, they're not going to think in their head, wow, this is really nice of this guy, but oh my God, he's carrying a gun, because those are two conflicting reactions.
It depends on how you're carrying a gun. If you have it out and you're waving it around, I'm going to be running for cover. But if you have it in your holster, I don't feel threatened by it.
Absolutely. Well, I tend, whenever I open carry, I try to present myself in a manner where people will not be scared. You know, when you look at why are people not scared of a police officer holding a gun? Well, there are more cases of police brutality and police abuse of power than there are of individuals going out and killing people and having mass shootings. So, but what makes people comfortable with a police officer carrying a weapon is a uniform and a badge.
Right.
So I kind of like to use the same philosophy. If I go out well-dressed, well-mannered, and present myself in a way that people are comfortable with me, then they should also feel comfortable with my weapon. Also, when I'm out in the community more and more, they should become desensitized to it. They should be like, oh yeah, it's that guy again. Yeah, pretty decent guy.
Well, if you see somebody in a uniform, the first thing that you think that is, number one, he's trained.
Right.
Number two, he's certified. And number three, if he works for law enforcement, he's on the side of the people. Not always the case, but I would say at least 95% of the time. What bothers me most about the way that the gun manufacturers and the gun ammunition and the retailers are being blamed for a lot of these school massacres is basically these school massacres are being used as a tool,
right,
to attack a certain a certain industry.
Absolutely.
And if you really traced it back to where the problem begins, if you look back in our history, and you see that the manufacturing of weapons started here in 1776, about the time when England started to not ship over weapons and gunpowder because they had intentions of subordinating us to their authority. They already had a stand-in army here in America that was here since the end of the French and Indian War. But if you go from 1776 until 1995, there were no school massacres in our country. And so all of a sudden, why are these school massacres happening if we had for 120 years prior to the first incident that weapons were probably easier to get.
Right.
There were less restrictions.
Absolutely.
You didn't have to have licenses to have many of these weapons. Now, all of a sudden, you have all of these restrictions and all of these safeguards and everything since the 1980s.
Right.
And now you're seeing children going in with automatic weapons and randomly killing other children
Right.
and their teachers. What I had done was I had gone back and I had looked at the first incidents that we had with the people getting shot by drive-bys, and that started to happen in the 1920s during Prohibition. So what was the first reason that this happened was a progressive legislation, was the 18th Amendment,
Right.
which was the Prohibition Amendment. So what the government, every time the government tries to regulate human nature, they seem to make greater problems.
Absolutely.
When they took prayer out of school in the 1960s, you didn't see crime go down, you saw crime go up. You saw more violence in the schools. You saw more use of drugs. You saw teenage pregnancies go up. You saw moral principle go down the drain. But you still, without prayer in school, you still didn't see school massacres.
Right.
Okay. But then in the 1980s, you had the first phase of political correctness. The first phase of political correctness was to demonize our founders, to demonize our Constitution, to tell the children that they should be ashamed of their European heritage. And these were the things that were sending our children away from establishment, away from their parents. The school was replacing the parent with with political correctness. And then in the 1990s, we saw the second phase that came under the Clinton administration that was now demonizing established religion and turning people more towards a metaphysical types of religion philosophies, such as, do no harm, do no wrong. And now, within 2 years after we see the religion being attacked directly by the national government and having political correctness invoked in the schools, we now see these school massacres.
Absolutely.
My opinion on that is that if you take the personal touch out of caring for children, such as what was happened in the 1980s, teachers became so wary about touching a student. I mean, sometimes to take a child and make them feel better, to make them more secure, it takes a hug. But when you hug a child now in school, the first thing they do is they start investigating the teachers, are they pedophiles, are they showering with their students and things like that. And that all comes under political correctness and the government's self-appointment of they are now the protectors of the children, not the parents.
Absolutely.
And they even protect the children from the parents. so that children can't be disciplined by the parents. They can't be disciplined by the teachers, because a teacher would be expelled from school if they slapped a student like they would when I was a kid. I see if you want to stop the children from engaging in these murders, these mass murders in school, I think what needs to be taken out of the schools is political correctness. Get the federal government out of our religious and moral principles and put it back into the community like the founding fathers intended it to be.
Absolutely.
The Bill of Rights was never intended to be invoked by the national government, because it was a separation of jurisdictions between the federal government and what was being reserved to the states. And I think that's the way it has to go back to, where the states retain their ability to be able to make legislation in regards to moral principle. If the community wants to have prayer in school, it is not a violation of separation of church and state unless it's being forced.
Right.
So if it's a voluntary commitment or a voluntary act of the community, it does not violate the separation of church and state. And I can show written documentation of that in the first constitutions of the state governments, which were actually the design in our three-branch system of government and not the federal constitution. The institution of state church was ended 15 years prior to the federal constitution and the Bill of Rights being ratified to law. So that is where we have to look for the interpretation of the separation of church and state. And if we look back to the proper documentation, the courts would never be able to make the interpretations on the laws that they have been coming up with. I mean, so where do you stand on the separation of church and state?
Well, I think what we're talking about here ultimately is culture. And I've been pulling up the definition for culture is the totality of society transmitted behavior, patterns, arts, belief, institutions, and all other products of human work and thought. To me, and this is my philosophical view on things, is that culture is a naturally occurring it's a naturally occurring societal institution. And I think what we have here is a government who's trying to implement what it deems to be appropriate culture into society instead of allowing
indoctrination.
Right, exactly. Instead of just allowing it to happen and letting it be a natural thing. And what we're talking about here is freedom versus not being free. You know, what we have here is government implementing their beliefs upon the people, as opposed to the people having the right to come to their own conclusions, their own beliefs. To go back to church and state, I mean, taking prayer out of school, you know, prayer is a deep and personal decision to make. Nobody can force you to say something to God or to even believe in God. So to hear people say that it's religion is being shoved down people's throats, it's ridiculous, because you can't force people to believe anything. You can force them to recite a certain set of words, but that doesn't have any meaning unless the belief system is actually there. Look at firearms. Until 1939, okay, you could order a machine gun through the newspaper for about $300. Until the 1900s, when you got out of jail, if you did not own a firearm, they issued you a firearm, gave you a gun to have safe passage to go back to where you live, where you work. They recognized that the individuals were responsible for their own security. So the government, once you were released from jail, would give you a gun. Now what do we have? If you commit a felony, you're not allowed to own a gun. It doesn't matter if it's a violent crime or a non-violent crime. What it boils down to is government is implementing their own culture. Look at our alcohol. You talked about prohibition. Look at alcohol laws. You know, kids in other countries that don't have as strict alcohol laws don't go out and do the binge drinking that kids in this country do. They don't go out and drink and drive like kids in this country do because it's a cultural aspect. The government hasn't banned those things and regulated those things. Countries that have legal drug use, you see less drug-related crime, less murder, less violent crime as a whole. Same with firearms laws. Countries with fewer firearms laws have a lower rate of violent crime. So what we have is the government implementing morality, the government trying to implement culture, and what that does is it throws the whole continuum off, because it's essentially saying that you and I don't have the right to believe in what we want to believe in, to act responsibly on our own behalf. We don't have the right to define what is responsible or not. That's now left up to the government. And I think that's with the church and state, with firearms, with alcohol, with any laws concerning morality. I think that's what we're talking about here, is the government trying to implement their idea of culture on us.
Well, that began with the 14th Amendment, because prior to the 14th Amendment, the national government wasn't a national government. It was a separate government of the Common Union Trade Organization. And the state governments were the actual republics. Right. The 14th Amendment expanded the jurisdiction of the federal government, and it was supposed to expand the court, the ability to be able to hear cases that it was not allowed to hear prior to that, and give the federal government the ability to be able to make laws through the process of legislation described in the Constitution. Since the 14th Amendment and the assumption of power taken by the federal government, the courts are now part of the judiciary, and to where they're making laws by interpretation, and the Congress are part of the judiciary, because they are now mandating sentences and fines. So what we have is a system of judiciary that no longer represents or even resembles the system that was established in the Constitution. And a lot of people become victims of crimes perpetrated by the federal government that are infringements of their constitutional right. And they are denied their due process of law, like I was speaking about independent agencies earlier. Independent agencies use this grant bribery process to get the states to participate in a program such as the National Highway Data Bank, to where they would actually receive money, and to get that money, they would have to participate in this program by the federal government, and have to submit the names and the information about the drivers in their states. And once your name is in that data bank, even if it's a misdemeanor ticket and the misdemeanor ticket no longer is no longer valid under statute of limitations, you're still required to go back to the state that you got the ticket in to be able to get that ticket, get your name taken out of the federal data bank. And there are over 30,000 complaints against the federal Highway Administration for this reason, because some of the people are in California or Washington State or somewhere in the Midwest. In order to be able to get a driver's license reissued to them, they got to drive all the ways back or fly to New York or Maine or New Jersey or any of these other states, and then they have to have themselves arrested on a warrant that might be outstanding on them in order to be able to get a court date to where they can be held up to 90 days. This is unusual punishment. This is extreme and far beyond anything that a misdemeanor offense should require. And some of these people have been charged thousands of dollars in representation to get a $50 ticket or a $200 ticket taken off of their driver's license. And it's an abuse of power. And that abuse of power came in 1937 with a court decision. I believe it was Schechter Poultry against the United States that had changed the law of independent agencies that was first ruled as being unconstitutional. Now independent agencies can make law that are not being subjected to the review of the United States Congress. So they make statutes of law that have slowly encroached upon the states because the states can't refute these statutes of law that are being made because they're out of the jurisdiction of the states. They fall under the national legislation, but there are no laws being made. They're all hypothetical, in exchange of money, in exchange for data or participation in a program. And this prevents a person from being able to go in the state that they live and to be able to fight these things. So they're being denied their due process of law to be able to defend themselves. They're being denied their right to be able to have their day in court. With these different aspects of independent agency, okay, especially with the healthcare, IRS, and gun control, they all have their way of penetrating into our personal lives. Now you have some data there on concealed carry and stuff, some percentages of crimes committed. Is that by people who have licenses to concealed carry, or?
Well, what these statistics are, essentially what they say is the FBI crime statistics state that in states with concealed carry laws, murders are down 8.5%, rapes are down 5%, aggravated assaults are down 7%, robberies are down 3%. It boils down to a personal ability to protect oneself. The other statistic that we have on here is that 3 out of 5 polled felons say they won't mess with an armed victim. So with these numbers,
they get shot.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. What it does is it jeopardizes job securities for a criminal when they know that there is a chance of people retaliating. I mean, you think about it. A predator does not go after the strongest in a pack. They go after the weakest.
Right.
Is somebody with a gun going to be the weakest in the pack? Probably not. So, that's one of the things that kind of, if you look at the logic behind it, it makes perfect sense.
Well, I've known. I don't own a gun. I haven't used a weapon of any kind since I was in the military back in the 1970s. But I do know this: a couple times that I got mugged walking down the street. I wish I had one, but I don't have one because I don't feel my life is in jeopardy that much. I don't live in the greatest neighborhood, but it's not a bad neighborhood either. I think that a person's option to carry a weapon is his own, and if you don't want to carry one, you don't have to. Well, I don't feel the necessity for it. Mm-hmm. But when I see somebody else that has one, it doesn't bother me that they have one, because I understand that there are more. The purpose of the Second Amendment was never really there to protect yourself against your neighbor.
Right.
It was to protect yourself against influences that were beyond your control. And okay, for instance, south of our border, we have 31 nations. Okay, They don't belong to the United States of America. They are independent state countries. They call themselves a federalism, but they don't have a centralized government like we have. Under the NAFTA agreement, when the NAFTA agreement was ratified in 1993, every one of those nations was a nation that had a representative democracy similar to the United States of America. And now, 20 years later, all of those nations are now either dictatorships, communisms, nationalisms, or social nationalisms. And my concern was, if NAFTA was such a great thing, why would these nations suddenly turn to a form of government that was in opposition to the United States government? And I was recently watching a video that was about the American businesses that have gone down to Mexico. And it seems like what's happening now down in Mexico, to where American businesses are going down there, which I don't have anything against American businesses. That's exactly what I support here. But you have to recognize what the problem is in order to be able to deal with the situation. So if you look at what the American companies are doing, they went down there, they got involved with the politicians, they got the politicians to support them, and now what they're doing is they're doing exactly what Parliament and the King of England was doing to us that caused the revolution in 1776. The same exact thing. They are. It's all about business. Everything is about profit. It's not about the people. It's about the government. It's about the politicians, and the Mexican government and many of the South American governments are all against the NAFTA agreement. They want to pull out of NAFTA. Many of the businesses here, the smaller businesses, the manufacturing companies that are being run into the ground, are all saying we need to get out of NAFTA. And if that many people on both sides of the NAFTA agreement are suggesting that we get out of NAFTA, what's keeping us in it? Just the businesses that are making their money off of it, the stock markets, the large international corporations that are involved. And in my opinion, I even wrote an article about it, and it's on my website, about NAFTA being the greatest national security risk this country has ever faced. And I mean, look at what's happening. Our government sells weapons down there in Mexico. They're selling weapons down in South America. And then they want to restrict the weapons up here in America from our use. It just has a two-sided perspective from it. Why are they trying to disarm us at the same time arming
criminals?
Arming criminals, or in this case, governments that are in contradiction to our representative democracy here in the United States. You have to ask them, what are the motivations behind this? Because you can't have it both ways. If the people are not being satisfied, and the economy has gone down the hill, you don't attack the industries that were the foundation in this country. Tobacco and firearms and alcohol are the things that support most of the progressive programs that are out there. And yet they're fighting against them. They want them disbanded. And every time that they pass some kind of a legislation against these industries, it always has a counter effect. Like, for instance, I talked to a manufacturing company here in Pennsylvania. It's a small little company, works out of his garage. He's licensed, he's federally licensed, he has state licensing, And he says to me that the gun ban proposed by the United Nations and the President of the United States has done more for his sales, to the point to where, he's making more money now than he ever did before. Okay, so the gun ban is not deterring people from going out and buying weapons, because they have the potential of being confiscated, and they would lose money if those weapons got confiscated. In fact, it's doing just the opposite. In fact, a newspaper clipping that I read the other day said that the background checks have gone down 10%. But did they go down 10% because of the gun ban, or the threat of the gun ban? Or why did they go down 10%?
They went down 10% because the shelves are empty. There's no guns to be found. As a gun owner, we have 3 or 4 gun stores in this area, and shortly after Newtown, maybe a week later, I went into 3 out of the 4 that I know of in the area, and almost all of them, the shelves were cleared, completely gone. A couple hunting rifles, and all because, like you said, I mean, what happened is people caught wind of the legislation that's coming down the pipeline. People went out and bought guns, and it wasn't just assault rifles, the black ones that look scary. It was everything. It was hunting rifles. It was shotguns. It was everything. 22s. The funny thing is, the 2 makes of ammunition that you can't find right now are 22 and 9mm. 2 small caliber rounds. You can't find them anywhere. As soon as they hit the shelves in Walmart, they're gone. As soon as they get shipped into the gun stores, they're gone. So it's not the 223s, the scary black guns that the government's demonizing right now. We see, I mean, across the board, people are buying more guns. People are buying more ammunition. But as you were just talking, one of the left-wing progressive conspiracy theories that I recently heard was that the reason for this talk of legislation is so that the gun companies and the ammo companies would actually bring in more business and then possibly ramp up the economy that way.
So, sort of like bucks for junkers?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I thought the same thing when they started with analog TVs and disbanded that. And I was kind of I was animate about that. But after I got my flat screen TV and could plug my computer into it, I was like, I got over that pretty good.
Absolutely.
But so I mean, it's a matter of perspective of what the government, why is the government doing what it's doing? I don't even think they know.
Well, a quote from Ronald Reagan, and I won't go to the whole quote, just the last part, the most important part is government is the problem.
National government.
Right. Well, so this is what that's what he was referring to. So, whenever government gets involved, our liberties, shrink. So when government power grows, our liberties shrink. And it's just the natural progression of things. Freedom is not
It goes back to the 14th Amendment.
Right, absolutely. Well, and freedom is not, it's a dichotomy. You're either free or you're not. You can't be a little free.
Yeah.
Can't be. Show me somebody who's a little bit free, or a lot free, or mostly free. There's no such thing. You're either free or you're not.
Yeah.
What we have here is a society that's been nationalized, globalized, so to speak, and as that national power grows, our power decreases. It gets smaller. Yeah. Our ability to make our own decisions, it gets smaller. Going back to what you said about owning firearms, the original Pennsylvania state constitution mandated that its citizens owned firearms. If you did not, you paid a tax to pay for police.
Yeah.
Because the framers, William Penn, recognized that it was an individual's responsibility to be able to defend and protect themselves, not the government's right or responsibility to defend people.
Right.
Police don't show up while a crime is being committed. Police show up afterwards.
Yeah.
That's the way the government works. It's a microcosm of the government as a whole.
Right.
The government shows up afterwards. It's a reactive force, you know, and what it does is ultimately it takes away our freedoms, you know.
Well, that's maybe what we should name our police force, the police reactive force.
Absolutely.
You know, they took protect and to serve off the side of the cars. You know, maybe we ought to put it in reactive.
Well, the Supreme Court ruled that no police agency in existence has any responsibility or obligation to protect the citizenry.
Right.
The Supreme Court ruled that. The United States ruled that the police have no obligation to do that. Police's only obligation is to the law. Whether that law is constitutional or not, it doesn't matter anymore.
Right.
So we have a Supreme Court who's saying, you know what, these police aren't here for you to protect and serve you. They're here to protect and serve the law, which is established by government, which is there in opposition to we the people.
Right. And we can talk a little bit more about what the 14th Amendment had done. With the 14th Amendment expanding the authorities of the federal government, have actually silenced the state legislatures from being able to represent the people. They built a wall of separation between the states and the federal government. And what has happened, what we've been seeing in the last, I would go further than the last 4 years. I'll go all the ways back until the Clinton administration, and maybe even further than that, to where the states have always tried to represent the people, but now that the federal government has found its loophole in getting into our civil liberties and crossing the line of separation of church and state by redefining religious and moral principles as civil law. Now that they have redefined as civil law, they have put government at the highest point of society. Parents and religion have been reduced to, oh, you don't have to listen to them. The government says, okay, you can, if you're an 11-year-old, you can go out and you can fornicate as long as you use government prescribed contraceptives, okay? If you get pregnant, you don't have to tell your parent. You just go to your teacher will send you to the nurse in the school, and the nurse will give you all the information that you know to go to an abortion clinic, and a teenager, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, can have an abortion, and the parents never even know what happened. This is a reduction in the status of parent-to-child relationship, and it goes back to the breakdown of moral principle being taught correctly by the community, by the parents, by the churches, and placing it in the hands of the federal government, which has absolutely no personal contact with the individual because they're not the direct representatives of the citizen, and into the hands of the schools. And then the schools are being regulated to where the teachers can't have personal contact with the students, because I know when I was a teenager, when I was going to high school, the teacher used to have used to bring students over the house, and we would have a little celebration, and we would go over the mathematics, or we would go over history classes, and they would tutor the students in their home. You can't catch a teacher allowing a student near their home anymore.
Right.
They can not only lose their job and their career and their pensions, but can also wind up in jail with lawsuits. It's ridiculous. You cannot give a student personal attention because that might be deemed in the wrong light and wind up having you placed in jail or even under suspicion, even an investigation as being harassing a child or for any reason could be a career-ending venture for a teacher. So they built a wall in between the teachers and the students. They built a wall in between the child and the parent. They built the wall between the state representation and the federal government.
Right.
The best thing to do is to reassess where the problem is, and the problem is the 14th Amendment. And what the 14th Amendment needs to be, it needs to have done to it, is an amendment that would give the states back the right to be able to represent their constituency, and the only need is to add what is missing from the 14th Amendment, which are the countermeasures to the powers, the new powers and new jurisdictions that were granted to the federal government. That was lacking. And that is the reason why the constitutionality of the 14th Amendment has become a great issue in the last 15, 20 years. You have these groups out there that want to repeal the 14th Amendment, want to repeal the 16th Amendment. And if you look at the ratification processes, that is exactly the foundation of the progressive movement in this country, is to make the law by breaking the law, by undermining the check and mechanisms that were created by the Constitution that Woodrow Wilson had explained as being cumbersome to the legislative process. Well, that's what the check and mechanism was to do, was to keep any faction from being able to get an authority, such as the progressives have taken over the National Democrat Party. And they don't represent small businesses anymore like they used to. They don't represent the individual worker. If you're not union, you don't count. The old Democrat Party that my parents used to belong to was a Democrat Party that represented the homeowner, the small homeowner, the individual, not the commercial homeowners or not the landlords, but the person who worked, saved up money, got a loan, put it all on the line to put a roof over their head to give themselves a better life, are no longer represented by the Democrat Party. And more people are figuring this out and have turned first to third parties. But in the last election, because I was running for United States Congress, I became very involved in watching the registration of the voters. More people have now registered as no affiliation voters than ever before. There are 620,000 no affiliation voters right here in the state of Pennsylvania, which are denied their right to be able to vote in the Democrat-Republican primaries. And they are recognized by the Democrats and Republicans and the state of Pennsylvania and the boards of election and the FEC as being legitimate members of the Democrat and Republican parties. But because they do not express a specific issue in the party agenda of the national parties, they are denied their right to be able to participate in an election process that is for them. And for this reason, the No Affiliation Alliance has been promoting the right for independent voters to be able to vote in the primary elections as no affiliation. They should not be kept out of the election process. And 620,000 voters can mean the difference in the outcome of any election, especially the governor's election that's coming up in this next in the next midterm. And well, this was our first show here, and one of the things I wanted to explain was about our name with Lexington Green. To those who aren't revolutionary buffs, the name, the Lexington Green was where the first shots of the Revolutionary War had taken place, and it was over commerce. And that's the reason why I chose this name for this program, because this program here is to represent the small businesses, the homeowners, the individual non-union workers, especially the family-owned farmers, who are probably the least represented people here in this country. So I have to say good night, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place, same channel. And tune into our website, and you'll find some very interesting literature there. And I thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right.